So I've been trying to sift through an idea in my head recently. No one particular thing has triggered it. It's kind of a cumulative thought after several years of passively observing debates between guys like Sam Harris, Dawkins, uh, Jordan Peterson on the other side, uh, Peter Hitchens, so on and so forth. All right. What always seems to happen is there's this debate about God, whether God exists and what God is. What often confuses me is how both sides jump in between justifying the existence of God using morality and vice versa. In other words, they both make a philosophical error whereby they say uh, better moral outcome, therefore God exists, or better moral material outcome, therefore God doesn't exist. And it's kind of interesting because it's completely irrelevant. It's literally what philosophers call a false dichotomy. It's a false either or. There are several outcome possibilities and several valid interpretations of the aggregate of all data, whether you could determine, if humanity is better off or worse off in either scenario. So I want to start a discussion and get feedback on the idea that whether or not God is real, whether or not morality is real, objective morality is real, and whether or not it's more useful are simply not the same thing, and vice versa. It could very well be that humankind must believe in God to have a functioning society. And that is zero evidence for the existence of God. It's evidence for the usefulness of believing in the existence of God. Or vice versa. If you're an atheist materialist and you say religion leads to war, that's not evidence for the non existence of God. It's evidence for the an inferior human condition if people believe in the existence of God. So I was trying to think of a parallel to this. So for me, the best the best example we have in real world right now that comes close to kind of encapsulating the entirety of what we would traditionally call God is fiat money, right? It's omnipresent, it's omnipotent, it's everywhere. It is the final arbitrator of all things in our modern society, virtually everywhere in the world. And even more importantly, we have fractional reserve ratio banking fiat. So it's not backed by anything except for nation states, general, the social buy-in generally into all nation states. In other words, it is a religion. It is a very functional religion. I actually think that if you were to go back to the Middle Ages and observe Christendom, how people interacted and how they valued relics, it, it, they would be treating their Christian religion the exact same way that we reference our modern banking system and the stock market, so on and so forth. Okay. In others, nobody in the Middle Ages was questioning the validity of the relics and of the intercession of the priests or so on and so forth, right? Like Ellen Greenspan would be a cardinal in the Middle Ages, probably the most important cardinal in Europe. Now, the reason why this is so perfect is because there's not a single reasonable person on the planet. There's not a single thinking person on this planet who thinks that fiat money is real. It is a mass social delusion. And it works. And it works better than the truth. Because the reality is that every single economic transaction is nothing but trading daughters for cows. That's it. We figured out this way to trade daughters for cows indirectly using these arbitrary tokens that overcomes all of the problems of the truth, right? Friction. How do you trade half a daughter for half a cow or a quarter of a daughter for a cow? You know, some cows are worth more than some daughters, and some daughters are worth an entire herd of cows. How do you transport these goods across the nation, right? Fiat money solves all of those problems, and it creates human flourishing. And it creates a better moral existence because society no longer walks down the street viewing young, attractive women as, you know, numbers of cows. But here's the thing, it only works because we enforce it with the law, right? You're not allowed to not believe in fiat money. You must accept payment as tender if you are any kind of a vendor. If there are any kind of acknowledged debts, you are required by law to accept payment in fiat money or something else, but you cannot refuse that fiat money in that jurisdiction. Okay? And and I think it's pretty much perfect because we don't have an alternative. Even things like crypto, they're just a different form of fiat money. They're still just a token traded, right? They're still just a fiat. So maybe in some telepathic future space society where we wouldn't need tokens anymore, we could teleport. We'd be teleporting daughters and cows again. I don't know. But save for a handful of patriarchs in Afghanistan, no one wants to go back to trading daughters for cows, even though that is the truth with a capital T, and we are living a lie, willingly living a lie every single day. And I actually think that's the more interesting discussion. Just like fiat money, in order to have a functioning society with some sort of social contract based on a like assumption of morals, you might need God. You might need a mass delusion that's everyone agrees to believe in and maybe is even enforced by the state. That's where it gets uncomfortable for the atheists. But that's not evidence for the actual existence of God. Just like the usefulness of fiat money is not actually evidence for fiat money being real. Okay? And then you get into a far more interesting conversation, in my opinion. And I do approach it secular. I don't believe in a God. I'm not an anti-theist, though, because when it comes to the implications of morality in society, I'm very much agnostic. To me, it seems like a draw. The Enlightenment has been good for society, but I don't know if secularization has been. You get into some very tricky historical realities, like slavery was not eliminated by secular enlightened theists or atheists. It was in every single way a moral crusade of progressive Christianity. That's just an irrefutable fact. Both sides can leverage that, and both sides should be troubled by that. Because, as Nietzsche said, if you crush a cockroach, you're a hero. If you crush a beautiful butterfly, you're a villain. Morals have an aesthetic criteria. To me, it's astounding that the YouTube philosophical commentators haven't quoted that yet, because that's actually a readily available quote. It was incredibly influential, and I think it's still one of the most insightful things that any modern philosopher has stated, right? My mother is an incredibly sensitive soul. She couldn't even butcher a chicken. She has no problem fishing. She loves catching trout. That is arbitrary. That's random, right? Modern vegans today, they they have a disgust reaction to the thought of, flesh on their plate. But they don't care about the millions of bugs that died on the windshield transporting their vegan diet, or even all of the baby bunnies that were ripped to shreds on the tongs of the harvesting equipment that harvested their soy, right? Human beings are we're sensitive to whatever we're sensitive to. And at the end of the day, human beings most certainly care about the pursuit of beauty, aesthetics, in architecture, music, when women, men, if you're if you're a woman, so on and so forth. And to me, it is incredible that it seems like everything I just said is so self-evident, and frankly, first year philosophy. And that is why I've started to view the discussion between all of those guys. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali is in there now also, and Alex O'Connor, I think it is, right? Newer, younger generation, but they're all kind of rehashing the same thing. And I also don't understand why we have such a natural distaste for, or sorry, a natural inclination to false dichotomies and such a distaste for multiple outcome possibilities. I think, to give Sam Harris some credit, he is trying to rationalize morality, but I think he's kind of being a little bit delusional, and he's not the first, right? The entire 1800s was more or less defined by secular thinkers trying to rationalize morality, and the abolition of slavery really kind of messed with them, because it was kind of the first irrefutable example of how um, it was an arbitrary moral assertion, right? Slavery was the human condition. It is natural. It is historical. Not having slavery is a novel human condition. And that flourishing did not come about because of secularism. But again, I don't take that as actual evidence for the existence of God. It's evidence for the usefulness of believing in the existence of God. And it's a double-edged sword, because that can also be used to rally an army to go wage religious warfare, right? The conviction is the usefulness. It seems to me that a nation's level of prosperity has nothing to do with what they actually believe, right? Just like the faces on the dollar bills of fiat's currency and the actual numeric amounts don't matter, right? It could be 1,000 pesos or $1. It doesn't make a difference. What matters is that society, kind of the wealth of nations, can channel that into the most productive means that achieve the most productive ends. That's where you get human flourishing. And I just think that, unfortunately for us seculars, you can't achieve it with one or the other, right? Christianity most certainly abolished slavery, but freedom of religion is entirely a secular value. It's only been achieved in nations with secular governments, because no matter where you go in the world, if you have any element of theocracy, any intertwining of one religion, dominant religion, with the power of the government, the other religions will be relegated, either overtly or more subtly through the education system, or just kind of quiet connections, business and finance so on and so forth, right? And people don't, for whatever reason, people don't like that. People don't like the possibility that we might be doomed to argue forever. That the argument is actually what achieves the optima, and it's not winner take all. Kind of like a democracy, right? If one party wins, you become a one party state. You're no longer a democracy. But you have to have that adversarial relationship between the parties. They both have to be competing to try and win the ultimate prize in order to maintain the existence of the democracy. And that is why the gravy train of false dichotomies will be rolling forever. Because once the conversation stops, the negotiation is over. Thanks for watching.